Hey, welcome to another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. I'm Bob Sanborn. Hey, always happy to have you guys here, and we have a great leader today again from Houston. We have Ann Chandler, who's the head of the Tahirih Law and Justice Center here in Houston. And thank you so much for being here in our studio.
Dr. Sanborn, thank you for having me. It's just an honor to be here with you this afternoon.
And you just need to call me Bob.
Okay, Bob, that's going to be easier.
So first off, tell people what the Tahirih Justice Center does, because it's sort of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so we are basically a legal service provider, but what we do is we work with immigrant women and girls who've really suffered some tremendous type of violence. We work with immigrant women and girls who are living in the greater Houston area who've suffered things like human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, fleeing forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and unfortunately the creativity and the list goes on of the violence that our clients have suffered. And we help them by partnering with law firms and corporations and ensuring that the women and girls have legal representation to safeguard their dignity, their life, protect them from deportation if they're afraid to go back to their home country. And we also stretch that type of advocacy into some public policy advocacy and education in the community.
Obviously, you're serving this very important role.
Right.
And I've known you for a number of years. I think we're going on almost 10 years
At least,
that we've known each other. And you used to head up the immigration clinic at the University of Houston.
I did.
And, as a leader then and as a leader now, if you were writing a book, Ann, on leadership, what would some of the chapters be about? What's your sort of the essentials of leadership under Ann Chandler?
Under Ann Chandler, I like that.
Yes.
Well, I would start with, leadership is really about, I think, focus and trust. In focus, meaning focus of your mission, and really asking yourself as opportunities come along strategically, how is this going to serve our mission, and how can we serve the community and where we're headed by taking advantage of this situation. And second, trust, because it's not about what can I do today? It's really building a team. And so for me, it's this trust relationship would have a lot of like the hiring, the captain, the fun, the encouraging folks to really be the star and take things away. So.
Wow. And you talked about passion.
Right.
I mean, obviously passion is a big deal for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that leadership transfers? I mean, for you, you're passionate about the Immigration Center. You're passionate about Tahirih. As a leader, can that passion transfer somewhere else, or do you think you're a leader just in your area?
Well, I think I'm of limited capacity. I really do. I believe that there are definitely nonprofit managers that love the art of nonprofit management. They like working with the board. They like supporting their staff. I'm not sure that that's me. I mean, for me, what gets my blood riled in the day and just excited to go to work really is serving the immigrant population who needs that foot up, that trust, that support. And so for my personal success, I think I'm most comfortable staying in that envelope of working with the broader community that I know and trust and support to support women and immigrants. And I think that's what makes me an effective leader, because I'm having such a good time with my staff and the community to move things forward.
Now, I've seen Tahirih grow tremendously over the last couple of years, right? And there's a Tahirih Center in Washington, D.C. How do you guys interact, and how is that limiting or helpful for you as a leader here in Houston?
Right. So I guess, my previous background, Bob, was coming from academia, right? Yeah. And here I am in a nonprofit, and I was so excited for the mission that I'm like, sure, I'll take this job. Why not? It's something different. It's a new adventure, without really knowing anything about nonprofit management nor structure. And so I soon learned that in our structure of an organization, we have one board in Washington, D.C., that defines, the mission and the long-term strategic plan. And then in the other offices, Baltimore and Houston, Washington, D.C., we all work with that board. And so that's kind of how we're structured, with a national staff that supports all three offices, that does things like our operations and our media work and our public policy advocacy. And so they're kind of like, you've got this mini staff long distance that you're working with day in and day out. To me, that's lovely. because the local staff were really doing things where you need boots on the ground, really working with the community, and yet when there are efficiencies to be had and you know, and in working through an audit, which I got today, you know, on a grant, it's like you pick up the phone and they actually know what they're doing, as opposed if I received it. Could you imagine?
So it's been really helpful for you to have all that knowledge there in DC.
I think it's fabulous. I think it's efficient. I think it's replicable. So to me, not knowing anything or what questions to ask, it's been, oh, well, that sure makes sense. I'm sure somebody thought about this. We do have a lot of leadership support in the Houston area, but in an advisory level. You know, they know the community, they know the needs, they know resources, they know what works. And so constantly working with that group of supporters to make the office successful, but not in a management board style.
Yeah. As you look at your career as a leader, what are some of the things that you think you've done really well? And what are the things that you felt like, oh, I really need to get better at doing that?
Right. Well, I think I fall mostly in the latter, Bob, where I would fucking say, oh, I did that. Really, maybe I should stop and pause. And so I think one thing that I've done well is, you know, kind of naturally treat the people that I'm around with a lot of respect and encouraging other people's growth. And I'm kind of a natural distributor of power and responsibility. And so I think that's helped to grow managers in the office who really kind of take responsibility of programs and develop with their own charisma and skills, and then I support them in doing that. So I'm not a micromanager, and I think to some extent that's been something I've done well.
Yeah.
So now we could work down the laundry list of things I haven't done so well. Some of that involves, I think, is, you know, excitement for projects that really for a long time has needed addressing without sometime pausing and saying, great, what is this going to look in the 6 months, in the 1 year, in the 2 year, and how are we going to sustain this over time? And what are all the soft resources that are going to need to support the project? So I think sometimes in just building that logic model and really pausing and saying, hold off, you know, what are the resources and how are we going to assure the longevity of the
That's
project?
part of fast growth, though, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, you've seen that, Children at Risk, we've seen that. When you grow that fast, sometimes it's hard to stop and reflect, isn't it?
It is. It is.
It's a hard thing to do. For you, I mean, we've seen you guys grow so very quickly. And one of the things I know about growth and organizations is that it has to be a well-run organization. It's all about leadership in terms of getting there. But when you look around you at some of the groups that you work with, do you ever see like big mistakes that you see other groups making that you naturally aren't making, or maybe you are making, but you see them and you think, oh, I wish other nonprofits wouldn't do that?
Yeah, I do see some of that, Bob. You know, I think Houston is somewhat unique in our ability to accomplish miraculous things using community partnerships and using volunteers effectively. So I think that sometimes the need becomes so intense that I think some nonprofits may just jump in and try to do it all directly instead of like, whoa, is this really what we are very good at? And if not, maybe we should find a community partner and set up a relationship of referrals, or perhaps we can leverage these volunteer sources. So in some of the traits that I see in my area of the law is seeing the need, getting so individually involved with the staff that not having the administrative staff support to kind of work maybe on a relationship of referrals and partnerships. So that's one trait I see that I think is important, and I've learned a lot from being in Tahirih of how to kind of slow down on the immediate need to come and spend time on those structural relationships.
How many lawyers do you have working for you right now, Ann?
Right, so we have 6 lawyers. We are staff of 13, and we a combination of lawyers and social services, and then an amazing position we started, which was volunteer coordinator and outreach and some operations. So grew from myself and soon an assistant to 13, which has been
it's amazing, huh?
Yeah, it's been wonderful.
How hard is it to manage lawyers?
Great question. Great question. So lawyers specifically, I mean, we go through law school, and I think it's taught in a way where you sit in your office with your name on your wall, and this is the way it's done. And in the work that we do, we are only effective as a team. I mean, part of it is hiring, and are you hiring someone that really is coming in and wants to work part of as a legal team as opposed to a lawyer? And so at the hiring state, we might have somebody who's graduate from Harvard, incredibly bright, writes the briefs that make the judges go, wow.
Yep.
And yet if they can't pitch in on an office need, or another attorney's on vacation, really it doesn't work out. And so for us, we hire attorneys that kind of naturally have that excitement to be part of a team, and then it works.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Because we often think, when we start off doing this, right? We think if they're the Harvard person and if they do the job, they're going to be around because they're getting the job done. But when you're running a team, you can be a superstar in the work, but if you're not a superstar in the team, there's really no need for you to be around, is there?
That's right. And it pulls energy and sucks out of the group in a way that really is not conducive to the growth.
And it's a lesson that all of us as leaders, we learn very quickly, that you think you have to keep the superstar, but if they're not part of the team, they really aren't.
They're really not a superstar.
Yeah.
That kind of defines what a superstar is in a nonprofit in a way that is, I think, fundamentally different than a corporate law firm. I think while teamwork is necessary, there are definite positions in law firms where you just need a superstar. But in the nonprofit world, where especially when you're working with networks of volunteers and structured responsibility, where this attorney does this and that team unity is critical.
How important for you as a leader is sort of visioning for the future, where you look out and you start doing planning with your group and say, what does the future bring for us?
I think absolutely critical. And what I had no idea when I took my job, and this goes on the laundry list of what I messed up on, is how to do that. I mean, there are actual tools and methodology that let your team be successful on this. And so they flew down one of a lady from DC who was our deputy director named Maeve, and I watched her lead my team, who I knew and loved, through kind of an annual goal setting routine where she was facilitating thoughts and ideas and reflections and mapping out priorities. And I was like, oh, I guess that's how you do it. And so in year 2, I got a little better and, had my own ideas. But I think not only identifying, mapping out what are we trying to accomplish, what has worked, what are our strategies for the next year, but then revisiting those, periodically, benchmarks, and saying, great, how are we doing and what should we change? Or have the situation on the ground changed to the fact that we might need to amend things? Was a skill that I had no idea what to do.
When I started at Children at Risk, and I think you've known me from the beginning at that time, we did a strategic planning session, and we came up with what we thought was sort of outside of the box plan for what we'd look like in the future.
Sure.
And 5 years later, we looked like that, right? And so when you look at Tahirih and you do a 5 or 10 year plan, what is it going to look like for you guys? What do you think it could look like?
So, our strategic plan in the long term, 20 years or so, is to have no work.
Yeah.
But, where we have a situation where immigrant women and girls do not need our type of legal advocacy.
Do you think that will ever really happen?
No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we still will be in the business. But we hope to find a situation where we have had the time and the moment to look at things systematically in an advocacy perspective, whether that's with, a federal employee who happens to work with an immigration court or immigration customs enforcement, and have fixed the rules of the game in a way that less individuals are desperately in need of safety planning, of an attorney, that there's a way to facilitate representation in a lot more. So part of our strategic plan includes really significant growth of our public policy advocacy team. In addition to just our straight up, what we do very well is increasing significantly the number of women and girls that receive representation. And we want to do that by national expansion. I mean, Children at Risk has grown significantly, and I think that urge to kind of, every office is going to look different. Every office is going to address local needs, but there are certain systems and learnings and kind of skills, best practices in the niche work that we do, which we think are replicable, that we can move to other offices. So we want to expand.
Yeah. Well, what would be the next logical city that you guys would expand to?
Good question. Yeah. So in Houston, we look at various factors when it comes to expansion, and one is, just demographic need, and that's one reason why Houston, obviously, 1 out of 4 individuals in the greater Houston area are foreign born. We know about the human trafficking situation. And look in this environment, what are the community organizations? Is there an organization already filling this niche? And in Houston, that wasn't present.
Right.
And second, obviously, funding. Is it a city where we think that ultimately, within a short amount of time, we can be self-sustaining?
And that's very important.
Very important.
And there are plenty of cities that, we often think about the valley expanding, but there's not much funding in the valley, right? So it's hard.
Right.
So you have to find that sort of combo.
Right. And right alongside funding, our ability to be effective and efficient has to do with our law firm partnerships. Our ability to leverage and have these amazing gifted attorneys spend 100 hours on an individual case, where then we become effective. And so Houston was a natural, because many of the law firms that we partnered with DC already had Houston office that we're committing. And so with that, cities we're looking to are San Francisco, Los Angeles, the East Coast, but we hope to have some West Coast presence, I think.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the head of the Houston Zoo. Kit was on here in the studio, and we talked about leadership. And Professor Desai, who I co-teach with, said I talked too much about the zoo, too much. But I wanted to ask you again about content. Talk about what you guys have been doing with all of these children that have been coming across the border. Talk a little bit about how effective you've been and where you feel like you haven't been as effective as you'd like to be.
Right. So the groundwork here is, really since about 2001, we've seen an increase in the number of children who are arriving at our border without a parent. They're on their own, and when they are apprehended, we call them unaccompanied alien children. We have different rules for individuals who are Mexican and Central Americans.
Right.
And the rules for the Central Americans is that they will be placed in a removal proceeding so a judge can determine if the individual has any claim for legal relief to remain in our country. But it also mandates that the kids should not be in a detention setting for long. They should be in the least restrictive proceedings. So what we see in Houston is we see many of these children, for a variety of reasons, are heading to Houston for an actual destination to reunite with someone that they may know. And yet when they go into court, we have clients as young as 3 up to age 17 who don't have anybody at their side to help them explain, hey, this was happening in my home. I'm scared to go back. And so what we've been doing is we've been working a lot with the immigration court, with law enforcement, with the detention centers and community providers to really significantly increase the number of kids who, when they go to court, they've got an attorney. And they have some ability to pull together their facts and their story. Our mission specifically with girls, we're working with girls who've suffered things like incest, domestic violence. Unfortunately, there are many gangs in Central America, so we see a lot of girls being recruited by the gangs, having suffered sexual assault. And this population specifically, when we're working with them, need more than an attorney. They also need someone to ensure that those kids are getting the resources they need for everything from school enrollment to counseling. And so we're partnering kind of with a lot of community providers to ensure that that kid is supported and able to kind of transition into safety in the Houston area.
Of the about 3,000 kids that end up in Harris County,
just
how many of them
months.
will have independent legal representation?
Well, so we go to court often. I was there this week, and there was 32 kids on the docket with 2 represented. And so
Wow.
we're usually seeing less than 10% of the kids at these master hearings, which is
And the kids
like a
don't know to
calendar.
ask about this, do they?
Well, yeah, they're just there. They're showing up for
Yeah.
court, and they've been told to do so. But where is that representation? And Houston, to Houston's credit, there was a legal training we had in late July. 450 attorneys showed up, over 500 in the audience, with 111 signing their names saying, I want to help. And so I think for us, the trick is, how do we get those kids' cases with really a private immigration bar that says, these kids need help? And that takes time, resources, and organization. So it's our help to kind of put those pieces together and
Wow.
get the kids represented.
I was down in the valley, the Rio Grande Valley
Right.
today, and I was there a couple months ago as well, I visited one of the shelters where a lot of the families were coming in.
Right.
And usually it's family and a couple of kids. And it was interesting to hear some of their stories, though. And there was one little girl who was really excited that they were going to Houston because she heard the schools were good there. So I thought, isn't that sort of interesting?
That is interesting. And the
So-
kids are really excited to be in school. I mean,
Yeah,
they are. It's like a
amazing.
huge opportunity to learn English. When you say, what are you looking for? What do you want to achieve? I want to go to school. Yeah. I wanna
Very
go to
good.
school.
I want to ask some of the questions from our advanced
Sure.
class. They really wanted to focus a little bit on evaluation and how you guys evaluate yourself, how staff are evaluated. And Richard wanted to know specifically, how are you guys periodically, how do you evaluate yourselves as an organization?
Right, and so we evaluate ourselves by setting up, kind of both, outcomes and outputs, and on one end, it's, how many individuals are we serving, over the year? How many individuals are getting both direct representation, and what is the result of that direct representation? At Tahirih, we have a 99% litigation success rate. So of the individuals that we represent, we're 99%, and we don't try to have that. In fact, we try to take the most difficult cases because it is about representation, it is about expanding legal relief. And yet I think because of our model and because these law firms...
Does any other law group have that rate of success? I mean, that's amazing,
I have no idea.
isn't
And
it?
I'm determined because the girls, if a girl has suffered horrendous violence, and we've had girls come over pregnant, we've had 3 girls recently who happened to see their mother get killed.
Oh my.
These kids need representation, so we're representing them with the hope that this statistic goes down, recognizing that representation is just vile. But it's amazing how when you get these attorneys that are used to working with corporate clients and they're representing a little 15-year-old, they're not going to lose. I mean, they get really, and I tell them, this case is really difficult, but they're creative, and so that works. So we look at that number, and then, but we also look, kind of quantitatively, how are we doing? So this is an assessment of client surveys, right? But then pro bono attorney surveys, where we randomly select our volunteer attorneys who evaluate us. Were we responsive to your questions? Did you get a case with ease? Was it clear in the referral? Did you feel lost when you went to court? Did we support you? As well as law firm coordinators of how they're doing, our community partners, and individual evaluators. A law firm has taken this on to call up our clients and kind of get more than what they may put on a piece of paper that's anonymous. So that's some of the ways we go through kind of evaluation.
And Martha wanted to know about you evaluating staff specifically.
Okay, right.
So as you evaluate some of the people working there, her specific question is, do you ever have some difficulty in evaluating staff where they become offended in the evaluation?
Yes. I think that's a natural thing. I think being evaluated as a human makes you very defensive. And so I think setting up really a structure of supportive evaluation, this is not to tell you, to tell you that you're just a bad person or this, but that we are always striving, and everybody in the office is continually trying to improve. And the way we do that is by, 360-degree evaluations where everybody in the office is expected to give critical input that is direct, both to the employee directly, as well as at a 90-day review and an annual review. And that is part of the feedback to really make sure that we're all growing professionally. So I think once you have an atmosphere of a lot of feedback, and in fact, the expectation that your peers are giving feedback, I think it becomes a lot less like personalized, that I'm not looking to you. It's, you know, I want you to give me feedback, and I'm going to give you feedback, and it's going to be frequent and direct and something we work on. And
wow. One of the things that I often will do when I'm doing these individual evaluations
Right.
is I let them tell me first from their perspective what could they be better on, and then I'll add on to that, and then I move to things that they're great at, so that they always end an evaluation feeling like, oh, they heard all the good stuff. Because so many times, I mean, over the course of a lifetime, you hear people say, okay, what are you good at? Now what do you need to get better at? And you're left with, what do you need to get better at?
Right, okay, so you kind of do, we do a self-evaluation, and I try to use the rule 3 for 1, right? 3 positive things for 1 that like, and really you gotta do
use that rule, that's a good rule.
But you do positive, you need to work on, and then leave with the positive.
Yeah, leave with the positive stuff.
I don't think I ever leave with the positive. I'm going to change that, Bob.
But that really works. I think it really works anyway.
Another thing I need to work on.
No, come on. So one of the questions, Nicole wants to know, how often does the board evaluate you?
Right.
And this is very interesting because in my experience, and we're talking with lots of people, boards don't really like to evaluate, it seems like. But does your board evaluate you?
Yes, and intensely. I mean,
do.
there's a Survey Monkey that goes out that's quite detailed, where you don't have the choice of just yes or no. It's explain. And then the board has a group of 3 that calls up various stakeholders in the community, not just staff, but maybe a law firm that does did the most pro bono hours for us will call up. What do you think? People who are on my leadership, folks that are raising money for me, and gets the good and bad and shares it with me.
Yeah.
And
is that always pretty good?
I think it is helpful because in your role with your leader, your staff is just one angle, right? And so I've been impressed of them reaching out to some of really the stakeholders and saying, what is she doing well? What does she need to improve on?
And other interesting thing that Monica wanted to know about, how do you evaluate the board in turn?
Right.
How do you guys evaluate your board?
Good question. And so, one of our main objectives of the board is raising money.
Yep.
So that is fairly easy. Like, is this individual, based on their capacity, leveraging their time or their resources or in some way? And there's ways to kind of quantify that. We do soft credit and donations and kind of share at each quarterly board meeting anonymously where folks are and give them feedback. And second, from board members themselves, they kind of, evaluate each other in a way. And then from staff perspective.
Does your nominations committee actually go through each board member and say what they've been doing? I mean, does that happen on I've seen that happen in some boards.
I think it probably does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you real active on the board? I mean, with the board members?
Yeah.
Pretty good, yeah. And then working with a national board, Ann.
Right.
I mean, do you go to Washington for the national meetings always of the board?
No, we don't. And so because we partner with law firms, they have pretty good video, just like we're enjoying this class today. So we go down to Aiken Gump, and you feel like you're sitting on the same table. There it's connected, and there's the rest of the board. And then once a year, we all get together in that same physical room. But for 3 out of the 4 meetings, we're really just sitting with video cameras and audio.
And it works pretty well.
I think it works pretty well. It's only a 15-minute drive.
Okay, so now I want to go to some of the people that have tweeted in questions.
Great.
And, I mean, we must have, we probably have over 100 tweets here today. So people are really interested in some of this stuff. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, Mandy Lovett, the class, wants to know, what's been the sort of the toughest, most emotional case at Tahirih for you, or one of them?
The toughest, most emotional case?
Yeah.
Oh, we have a lot of these.
I know. You guys, every single case is tough and emotional, it seems like.
Yeah, they are. And that's the nature of when you have so many individuals without legal representation, and you sit down at that week and you talk about 30 cases, but you only have capacity to maybe take 5. And so we take cases based on, if we aren't able to help this individual now, what are the consequences? Are they going to be deported? Or are they going to be in an unsafe environment this evening? And so by the nature of that kind of unfortunate triage, you end up with some cases that are quite heart-wrenching. I would say one of the cases that was heart-wrenching lately is in the area of human trafficking, our laws in the United States for foreign-born immigrants are very favorable. I mean, Congress passed something called the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act to say if you have been trafficked in the United States and you are able to provide reasonable information, and there's even a trauma exception now, that if you're so traumatized and you can't go testify in court against your traffickers because you're so terrified, maybe you have family members back in your home country, you still are basically usually allowed to remain here for at least 4 years and reunify with your loved ones and have some sense of safety net. The situation changes when you've arrived in the Houston area or you've arrived at our border because you are terrified and have been trafficked. So we see a lot of cases where they were trafficked through, Pakistan, they were trafficked through Mexico, through Central America, and this lack of dignity and selflessness and just raw terror is the same as what we see with trafficking victims in the U.S., but they're arriving at our border saying, help me. So we had one client who had been kidnapped and trafficked and moved around from gangs to one trafficking location enough in a sexual exploitation situation, and saw her roommate try to escape, and the traffickers caught her roommate and brought her back to the other girls and beheaded her in front of all the girls.
World. That's horrible.
Our client, because she's terrified, remained, and then one night after beating, because she was so sick she couldn't do more service, saw an opportunity to escape and did, but was terrified that somebody from would find her and bring her back to the traffickers, that they would be looking for her. But she made it across the border into the United States and saw somebody in a uniform and thought it was a Mexican official that would return her because they had branded her.
Oh, wow.
And so she was affiliated, and many of the individuals she served were from the Mexican army, but it was a U.S. Border Patrol, and she gave him a hug and realized she was in the United States and in semi-safety. Those cases are really hard to win under our asylum laws. She was from Mexico. Less than 1% of the people who arrive at our border without documents asking for asylum from Mexico win. And so working with someone where they've been through terror and horror, and how difficult it is to win asylum in Mexico.
Did you win with this?
We did.
Good.
We did win real recently. So it's still fresh on my mind. But I think these are the type of cases where the law can be really strong. And so you're used to working with the trafficking survivor and focusing on their social services and and then when you work with someone who's very much feels like your other clients, but it happened just a few miles south of the border, and they become very difficult to.
Some of the stuff is so hard, isn't it?
It is hard, and but it's amazing. It's also mostly you feel like, wow. I mean, the strength of individuals and the perseverance of our clients really makes you think, if I was in this situation, would I have this will? Would I have the strength? I don't think they're incredibly courageous.
Yeah.
So while it's hard on one level, you see like this human dignity and strength that you just can't believe. And you see the Houston community respond where, when I took this job, I'm like, you want us to work with who? All these corporations and law firms? They're a little conservative. We're in Texas. Our clients are undocumented. That means illegal.
Right.
And yet that's really far from the truth. These women are searching for safety and dignity, and a lot of people do amazing work and volunteer.
Yeah.
So in that case, there were
help.
volunteers. So to me, they're usually as hard as they are to work with, they're also very rewarding.
So going back to evaluation, Elizabeth Iparea wanted to know if those you lead were asked to rate your leadership, what are some of the things that they would, some of the people that you lead, what would they say? We really love this about Ann.
I would think that they would say that she is not upset when I make mistakes. I make so many mistakes that when my staff drop a ball, it's like, whoa, I would have dropped that too. Let's talk about how I draw it and how we can juggle both. And at what point could have we reached out for support or let's just go back and try to reevaluate it. And I'm not somebody who naturally gets upset or thinks like, oh, what are we going to do with you? So I think there's an advantage of that kind of natural response that I hear about things early before there's too many things. And I think people see me drop a lot, and I'll communicate, hey, I feel like there's too much on my shoulders, that something's going to be falling, so please get to me early. So I think that would be one thing, would be kind of forgiveness or...
Yeah. I think it's amazing how well people respond to leaders admitting that they make mistakes and that they will make mistakes.
Right.
People are so forgiving, you know.
They are.
As opposed to you trying to hide that you make mistakes. You know, we all make mistakes. You know,
Yeah.
we all. No one's perfect. Sometimes you are, but
No,
so,
that's the theme of today.
Esmeralda Jimenez wanted to know, you know, when you talk to stories like you just told,
Right.
and you have staff that are working on this, is there something that you guys do to sort of stay mentally strong?
We do.
What is it that you guys do?
Okay, so we do a lot of things. Number one, eating. We eat together, we have potlucks,
always
and
good
we
for the
got,
soul,
it's
isn't
really
it?
good for the soul. Second thing we do is we do every year, like we work with the Houston Galveston Trauma Institute and a lovely lady named Rosalie Hyde, who teaches a lot about vicarious trauma. And especially our interns and our younger employees. This is very new, and how to not take these stories home when a lot of the weight of their life or their success is really like, did you file the petition on time? You know, did you respond? Are you being effective? It's tough. And so we actually kind of have to go away and like remind ourselves to recognize when we are traumatized from our clients, and recognize how to have that life-work balance, and how not to take your client stories home, and to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's really critical in any profession, but I think sometimes it's in this type of client-based advocacy, it is important to be reminded. So we take a whole day off just to do that.
In your offices, is there a lot of laughter? Do you guys try to sort of, or is it a serious place?
We do. I mean, law needs laughter.
I know.
Yeah, and this work needs laughter. So we do try to do that. And we also started, we worked with a volunteer organization this year named Vox Culture, which brings the arts to nonprofit community.
Yeah.
And we did a few things with clients, like we would invite, you know, handfuls. We started something called like a client holiday party and an art party, where our clients can bring their kids and do something fun. And I think it's really good for us, because usually when we work with clients, we do affidavit writing. And we go over, okay, what happened next? And how did he harm you? And how are you suffering? Tell me about your worst nightmare, and are you depressed? Where on the other hand, once in a while, to touch base with your clients when their kid is just having fun eating pizza and, you know, decorating glasses is also, I think, very good for our souls. So we try to kind of deliberately do something light with our clients.
We had Vox Culture on our radio show, and they talked about their work with Tahirih.
Yeah, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Chris Bell wanted to know about cultural norms that have been imported by some of the immigrants. I mean, do you see some of the cultural norms of the immigrant population that you work with being transported in the United States? That's a big question.
Well, I think the United States, we're just, every single family has different cultural norms. And in our community, that is what brings together the fabric of the United States, is cultural norms from individuals from all over the globe. So yes, of course. And I think working with our clients, many of our clients really are suffering from being brought up with certain cultural norms and now making decisions which they perceive going against or in violation of those own cultural norms. At Tahirih, we are not an organization that says this is right, this is wrong, this cultural norm needs to change. What we are about is supporting our clients and their voice and what they are trying to achieve in their lives, and representing them to get from their objective A to B and holding their hand in that process. So yes, we're often talking to them about a cultural norm of being an observant individual and in a marriage that does not leave their spouse regardless of what happened. And that may not be what they want to do. And that is very much a cultural norm. I mean, it's spread against many cultures, but So yes, I guess the question to that is, by all means, we work with cultural norms day in and day out.
Yeah, very good. Liz Earhart wanted to know about communication between you and your board. How does that work, and how much is there?
Right, and so I think it's there's the formal and the informal. I would say we probably err on a lot of communication.
Yeah.
With a client victory, periodically we just send it out. A client quote, an opportunity to work with the media or a blog, we send it out. The board communicates quite frequently amongst themselves on initiatives or somebody exciting. And so there's the formal, yes, here's your board packet for your quarterly meeting, but there's also the small little touches.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I mean, it's almost, you want to engage your board as much as possible.
Right.
To me, they almost need to be buddies, right? Just people
Yeah.
you're just really engaged with.
I think so. And knowing what your board and what the individuals want to engage with, and giving them the room and the opportunities and the tools to really be that asset.
Amy wanted to know about the biggest challenge for you going from teaching law at the University of Houston Law Center to working in a nonprofit. What's been the biggest thing for you in that change?
Right. So at the university, you're usually standing on a podium and teaching in this. And we ran something called an immigration clinic, which you're familiar with, but it's the closest to kind of like a residency in medical, where students actually come to you with case files and go to court. And so you don't have staff. You have students, and the students that we get in the immigration clinic are incredibly, excited to be there and to, get into court for the first time. But that's a very different relationship than managing a team and supervising. And it's sometimes at a certain point in the organization, it's not always fun to be a supervisor or a manager.
Right.
Periodically, you've hired someone and it's not just working out.
Right.
And you've got to give that direct feedback. I think it's a lot easier for a professor to sit down with a student and say, we need to slow down and look at your work, and to give someone a C+.
It's sort of an expectation.
It's kind of an expectation.
Students know that this is going to happen, but staff don't seem to know this.
They don't seem to know this. And so I think that relationship is fundamentally different and very challenging once you are kind of the leader and responsibility for really great performance. You owe it to the community and to the board to have high performing operations.
I find like one of the things when we talk about challenges as a leader, one of the biggest challenges is always personnel issues. I mean, it's all about, which is unfortunate, but it's just the reality, I think.
Right. And the one situation I had at my office, if you don't mind me sharing with it, the individual and her skills were amazing. The desire to do well was there, but the job wasn't right. The job description just didn't quite capture that. So having those conversations of honesty and example are not always fun when you have someone who's really trying.
Right. I'm doing a good job.
I know.
What are you talking about? Just, and I've had this before, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I'm like, well, it's not that easy always, is it?
Right.
So Brittany Kilgore wanted to know, what inspired your passion for immigration law?
Right. So what inspired my passion for immigration law was the immigrants. So I was in law school and I was in a student organization and saw a blurb to go down where you were, Bob, down to Harlingen. And there are, in Harlingen, there are many individuals seeking representation, and it was one of these unaccompanied childs. It was a little girl from Guatemala who her family just lost her when she was 13, and it turned out that she had been kidnapped by an older man who used to be in the military and kept her in her basement for 3 years, harming her and using her until a neighbor discovered her and connected her to her family, and her family picked her up. She was in the same dress for 3 years. And they gave her fresh clothes and they said, don't ever come back. You'll never be safe here. Go to America. And at that time, it was when the conflict was happening in Chiapas.
Yeah.
And she got stopped 17 times on that border. But when she made it to Harlingen, she says, I can't go back. I need help. And when I was looking at the law, I realized that's a really hard legal case. She's not really eligible for asylum. Asylum only protects, is it political opinion? Is it her nationality? Is it her race? Is it she a member of a particular social group? And realized these cases really don't fit. So I had an opportunity to assist her, and ultimately the case was successful, and saw her, kind of grow up. And I realized, wow, I guess I have a deep passion to be an attorney to advocate for folks who are really vulnerable. And find myself, 18 years kind of assisting the same demographic.
Well, did you grow up in Houston?
I didn't.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California, up in Sonoma County, where all those beautiful grapes are.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And
And where did you do your college? Where did you do undergraduate work in?
In Colorado.
At the University of Colorado?
Yes. No, in Colorado State. I was a Ram.
Wow. Yeah, no. How could you? And then law school.
And then law school.
Where'd you go to law school?
U of H, and then returned.
Oh, that's sort of how it worked out.
Yeah,
very good.
stayed here.
And Aruna Davies wanted to know, as you deal with some of these victims, are they initially, I would guess, and I guess she's guessing, some of them are sort of scared of using your services? Is that sort of
absolutely.
That happens?
Yeah, no, I think, it takes a lot of courage for individuals to reach out and come. And often they're in situations that are not yet safe. In domestic violence situations, we have individuals who have just left and are afraid of stalking, which is quite common. In human trafficking situation, the folks who are making money off their bodies are often still in the Houston area. And so there is good reason why our clients are scared. And on the other side, they're just scared sometimes because they feel utterly alone. They don't understand the structure often of the legal rules. Who are we? Our clients often come from communities where this concept of a nonprofit attorney who is going to hold their information in confidence, and not share it, is quite foreign. Or that the type of harms that our clients are afraid of having their daughters subjected to female genital mutilation, which is a horrible practice, that somehow the legal structure is going to be a place of protection. This is not necessarily what our clients understand. So we have to, on the front end, really do a lot of communication and explanation of our role and that we're there to really help you achieve your objectives. And this is for some of our clients, well, of course, I know why I know what you do, and that's why I'm here. Let's get to it. And other clients, you just kind of patiently have as many conversations as you can to build that rapport and understanding. But yeah, often they are very scared and confused, and I would be like 3 times more.
Absolutely. Nini Corazon wants to know about what other organizations do you partner with that also help some of the women?
Right. And so we partner with some really great organizations. One is called the YMCA International Services, and they have, the YMCA where you go for like swim lessons. They actually have an office that does everything from resettling refugees in the organization to helping victims of trafficking. And so we work a lot with them. And there's another organization called Catholic Charities that does similar work. And Children at Risk does advocacy work. And so really we try to, when anybody calls, we try to say, are we the best suited organization, for this case, or should we refer it? And that's one of the joys of the work, is working as a community.
Jason Covington has a question that I should have asked a long time ago. What does Tahirih mean? Oh. People probably ask you that all the time, right?
I know. And I mean, look at it. Tahir. What is this thing? And so Tahirih is actually, it's an honor to be Tahirih Justice Center. It's named after a woman who was born in Persia in the mid-19th century. And at that time, she grew up, she memorized the Quran by age 13. Her father was very educated and believed that women, like boys, should be educated. Men from afar would come and ask her questions about the meaning of the Quran, which she would answer from behind a cloak. The son of the Shah at that time asked her hand in marriage, but she said not just no, but no way in hell would I ever marry you. She was asked she organized women in different ways and was asked to read one of her pieces of poetry in an assembly of men. But when she did so, she was said to take off her veil, and it was to the horror of a man next to her that he slit his own throat. So ultimately, because of her actions and because of her beliefs, she was put to death at age 32. And one of her ending words was, "You will kill me as you will like, but you will not stop the emancipation of women." And so it's kind of in her honor, in her life, what she did during her life, her strength up to her death, that we named ourselves Tahirih Justice Center to support women who do really incredibly courageous things,
Yeah.
usually not just for themselves, but for their children, for their communities.
Wow, that's a powerful story
Yeah,
too, isn't it?
it is.
But the thing is, Ann, is that every story you tell is a powerful story. It's like you're working with all these women that have powerful stories.
Right.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and our society and our community is, I think, really enriched through their power and their courage.
Yeah.
So,
a few fun questions to end this very intense interview. I mean, you're such a great leader. You're such a great part of our community. But in your spare time, what's your favorite restaurant here in Houston?
that's tough because we have so many. Why did you have to choose that question of all? So I am going to say that my favorite restaurant is Agora Coffee Shop. It's not even a restaurant, but I go in there and I just get so happy. I feel like, so that may be.
It's because when you walk in
on West
you like
Highland.
Polly's?
I like Polly's too. My son went to Lanier Middle School, so
it's
I
right
like them
there.
right across.
Polly's has those great cookies. And I wonder, though, in Agora, is it because when you go there, you feel like you're just a little bit cooler?
Oh, I'm so cool. My teenage kid won't sit next to me, but I don't let that bother me. I still think it's hip, and I feel
Yeah,
hip.
I try to do all those things that help me be just a little bit cooler, and
I
my
guess
staff says, it doesn't help,
It doesn't
Bob.
help.
You're
And yet
not
I
really
still
cool."
go. So you're learning more about me just because of these
yeah.
hip places I want to belong.
So is there a place in Houston that not many people know of that you like to go to every once in a while, whether it be a museum or a park or some
Right.
sort of venue, sort of a hidden place that you like?
Place. Yeah. So for me,
Yeah.
I like Bear Creek Park with
Wow.
all of its mosquitoes and cockroaches because I like soccer and it makes me so happy that that park is so full and you get to go around the little trail and play soccer.
That's a huge park,
It's
too.
a huge park and it's
Yeah.
not that far.
Yeah.
And while the zoo was cool, you're never going to have a hard time with parking at Bear Creek.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
not, right? It's so far away to me.
Bear Creek.
Yeah, I know it's close.
Yeah.
But it's just so far outside of the loop, It's
It is far side out of the loop. So you got to find a time where you
just
kind
do a class that's all
kind of have to
commuting.
be in
So
Katy anyway, and then you just kind of pop up for the day. Recommended anytime from like October to April.
And the final question, and we asked this of you on the radio on our radio
Sure.
show. We asked, so when they do the Ann Chandler story, which I'm pretty sure they're going to do in Hollywood, who would play you?
So I thought we decided it's going to be Sally Field, isn't it?
But it had to be we'd have to go get in the DeLorean and go back a number of years for Sally Field to play you. Is there any current actor that you know of that would play you?
People going to help me out here?
Oh no one, they're not helping.
They're not helping there now. They're silent. They were smiling before. Now they're not my friends.
So we'll just stick with a young Sally Field.
I just don't know.
Yeah, there's got to be
I'm gonna
someone.
work on that.
Yeah,
I
know.
can Twitter it in, right?
Yeah, you can
Ann's thought
tweet.
of her answer.
You would tweet it in. You would tweet it
See?
in. So Ann Chandler from the Tahirih Justice Center, thank you
Bob,
so much
thank you
for
for
being
having
here.
me, and thank you to all the students. I think this program and this class is excellent, and I know you're going to be amazing leaders.
They will be.
Yeah.
They absolutely will be. Listen, we will see you guys next time here on the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. And keep up the great work, guys. Talk to you soon.